Good evening. Tonight we will drift into the quiet rhythms of a distant time, where the streets of an ancient city awaken and settle again with the turning of the sun. Let us begin among the stones and shadows of Rome, moving slowly through its textures, its silences, and the lives shaped within its walls. The first light of day arrived with a gentleness that seldom pierced the haze of the Roman dawn. A pale silver shimmer lay across the tiled rooftops, softening the sharp lines of brick and plaster that had baked under the sun the day before. The air itself carried a faint dampness, drawn from the Tiber's languid waters, and it clung to the worn wooden shutters that rattled in the earliest breezes. Rome stirred not at once but in fragments, with the dull creak of carts along uneven stones, the distant bark of dogs tethered to gates, and the subtle shift of fabric as a curtain was lifted by a cautious hand. The insulae, those towering, stacked dwellings of the poor, loomed with weary posture. Their plaster walls bore stains of smoke and mildew, their wooden beams warped with years of weather and fire. Between them ran alleys too narrow for the sky, where shadows lingered even in midday and the stench of refuse remained heavy. In these narrow veins of the city, light fell in slivers, broken upon the angles of stone, and footsteps echoed louder than they should. Closer to the forum and the more prosperous quarters, the stones grew cleaner, the streets broader, and the facades brighter with paint and carvings. Yet even here, under colonnades where merchants prepared their wares, the breath of Rome was tinged with soot from hearths, the iron tang of blood from yesterday's sacrifices, and the acrid smoke of oil lamps just extinguished. The city lived on contrasts: marble and mud, incense and rot, silence and cries. Among these textures, in a modest quarter near the Circus Maximus, a house stirred before dawn. It was no temple nor grand domus, but a place known by many, though seldom spoken of in polite company. The air within bore the mingled scents of oil, cheap perfume, damp straw, and the faint musk of bodies pressed too close in the hours before. Its shutters had been drawn tight in the night, leaving the chambers dim, yet already the muted steps of those who rose earliest could be heard. Women moving with slow precision, adjusting garments, smoothing hair, pouring water from clay pitchers into chipped basins. A day in such a place began not with laughter or leisure, but with careful attention to the body, for the body was both shield and offering. The basins filled slowly, their surfaces trembling as water met with worn bronze mirrors propped against the wall. Fingers dipped into the coolness, then glided across skin that carried both the faint grit of sleep and the traces of yesterday's touch. The ritual was neither hurried nor ceremonious. It was practical, shaped by necessity. A scented oil might follow if the coin of the previous night allowed it, rubbed into arms and shoulders with methodical strokes, leaving behind the faint sweetness of myrrh or the sharper notes of local herbs. Clothing lay folded in careful disorder. Thin tunics dyed in muted reds and faded yellows, sashes once bright now dulled with repeated washing, and the occasional piece of jewelry fashioned from bronze or glass, never gold. To dress was to prepare not only for labor but for scrutiny, for eyes that searched for softness in movement, for a lure in the angle of a step. A pinned shoulder, a glimpse of ankle, the sweep of hair, all were part of the silent language of the trade. The walls of the house bore marks of time as well. Faint drawings, initials scratched by idle hands, and stains that no lime wash could conceal. Lamps with blackened wicks rested in niches, their clay bodies roughened by years of use. When lit, they cast a tremulous light, throwing shadows across the painted figures that adorned the plaster. Scenes of Venus rising from the sea, of Bacchus crowned with ivy, of couples entwined in gestures both symbolic and explicit. These images were not merely decoration but reminders, guiding the imagination of those who entered, setting a tone that blurred between sanctity and transaction. Outside, the city's pulse grew steadier. Bakers opened their doors, releasing the smell of warm bread mingled with smoke. The clang of metal from the smith's shop resounded with a rhythm like a heartbeat, slow yet unyielding. Market stalls unfurled their coverings of coarse cloth, displaying amphorae of olives, baskets of figs, bolts of wool dyed in indigo or ochre. The clatter of sandals on stone increased, layered with the call of sellers and the brief laughter of children sent to fetch water before the day grew hot. Rome was awake, and every sound reinforced its vastness. For those within the modest house, the hours of daylight were both reprieve and preparation. Night brought the most work, but day required its own endurance. Some women remained within, mending garments, combing lice from hair with narrow bronze tools, or reclining upon couches to rest aching limbs. Others ventured out discreetly, draped in plain shawls, to fetch food, to visit the baths if fortune allowed, or to exchange words with neighbors who lived in similar shadows of respectability. The baths in particular held a peculiar duality, a place where bodies mingled freely in steam and water, yet where distinctions of class were never forgotten. There, beneath painted ceilings and vaulted rooms echoing with splashes and murmurs, one might wash away not only dust but also a measure of weariness. The sun rose higher, and with it came the smells of midday. Fish salted and frying in pans, onions softening over flames, and the acrid smoke of resin burned in temples. In the streets, beggars stretched out hands, children darted between animals and carts, and soldiers in armor gleamed under the light as they passed in disciplined lines. The presence of order, of empire itself, was never far. Even in the humblest lanes, the authority of Rome pressed like a weight. The women in the house observed such details not with wonder but with quiet calculation. Every sound, every scent, every shift in the city's rhythm held meaning. A day of festival meant more visitors, more coin. A day of mourning meant hushed tones and fewer footsteps at the threshold. The cycles of Rome dictated their cycles as well, binding them in a rhythm that felt eternal yet fragile. As the heat of the afternoon deepened, shutters were drawn again to block the harsh light. Within, the air thickened, scented with oil and dust. Some rested, stretched upon thin mattresses of straw, their breath slow with exhaustion. Others busied their hands with simple tasks, polishing small ornaments, braiding hair, stitching torn fabric. The hours of waiting carried their own gravity, for anticipation was itself a form of labor. Evening descended gradually, with shadows lengthening along the colonnades and the cry of merchants waning. Lamps were lit in temples, their flames flickering against marble, and the voices of priests carried low and steady. In the modest house, the true work of the day began. Oil was poured into lamps and lit with careful fingers. The rooms glowed with soft, uncertain light, revealing the painted walls in new hues. Hair was combed and wound into knots or left loose upon shoulders. Tunics were adjusted, girdles tied, and scents renewed with small dabs from clay vessels. Outside, the streets filled again, this time with revelers, gamblers, men returning from the baths or from the circus, their voices louder and their steps less steady. The rhythms of the night belonged to them, yet they spilled into the house like water through a crack, drawn by expectation. The chambers echoed with footsteps, with the weight of bodies upon couches, with the low murmur of words meant less for meaning than for sound. The women moved through these spaces with practiced grace, their gestures measured, their eyes steady though their thoughts wandered. Every laugh, every tilt of the head, every silence carried intention. Yet beneath the surface of performance lay the quiet endurance of flesh and spirit, worn by repetition, sustained by necessity. The night stretched long, and the house bore its weight in shadows and whispers. Outside, Rome's streets quieted once more, dogs returning to doorways, carts stilled, and the Tiber reflecting the pale shimmer of the moon. Within, the lamps burned lower, their oil consumed, their flames shrinking to faint embers. The air grew cooler, the voices faded, and the silence returned with the weight of inevitability. At last, when the final footsteps receded and the final lamp sputtered, the house settled into stillness once more. Bodies lay scattered in weariness, limbs heavy, eyes closed against the dimness. The cycle of a day had completed its circle, binding labor and rest into a rhythm as old as the city itself. In this way, the night gave itself to silence, the silence to sleep, and sleep to the slow, inevitable turning of time. The dawn that followed crept with quiet persistence across the rooftops, as though reluctant to disturb the heaviness that still lingered within the city's veins. Rome exhaled in fragments, the long sigh of a metropolis both restless and weary, its life renewed yet tethered by repetition. The sky was pale and uncertain, brushed with the faintest hues of rose and gold, while the Tiber flowed with sluggish constancy, carrying away the remnants of the night. In the modest house near the Circus Maximus, the earliest stirrings began with the sound of shifting straw, the faint creak of boards under careful steps. The air within carried the residue of the night before, the musk of close bodies, the sour trace of spilled wine, the heavy sweetness of oils that clung even to the walls. The lamps had long extinguished, leaving only faint smudges of soot on the plaster, but the memory of their glow remained, as if the shadows themselves still carried warmth. One by one, figures rose from their couches and mats, stretching limbs stiffened by hours of strain. The quiet was not of peace but of necessity, for mornings were seldom occasions of mirth. Water was poured once more into chipped basins, splashing against bronze mirrors dulled by time. Fingers rubbed away the grit of fatigue, smoothing skin where bruises flowered faintly beneath the surface. The rituals were methodical, born of habit more than hope, yet in their precision there lay a kind of dignity, the insistence that the body, however used, might still be prepared to face the day. The garments chosen were plain for daylight, coarse tunics that concealed more than they revealed, shawls draped loosely to render passage through the streets less conspicuous. Brightness was reserved for night, when the rooms glowed with oil lamps and expectation. Now, in the clarity of morning, discretion held sway. Sandals were tied with quiet patience, their leather straps cracked from wear, yet still serviceable. Beyond the threshold, the streets had already begun to stir. Bakers tended their ovens, coaxing smoke into the air until the lanes smelled of charred wood and warm bread. Vendors arranged baskets of olives and figs upon their stalls, their hands deft, their voices rising to greet the first customers. The cries of water sellers mingled with the clatter of hooves upon stone, while priests in white garments moved steadily toward temples, carrying vessels of wine and garlands of leaves. Rome did not awaken suddenly, but rather in a steady rhythm, like the tide against a shore. The women walked among these sounds with measured pace, their eyes lowered, their movements purposeful. Some carried small baskets to fetch food or oil. Others made their way toward the baths where steam and water offered both relief and concealment. Within those vaulted chambers, under painted ceilings that echoed with splashes, the city's divisions of class blurred just enough to permit a moment of respite. There, bodies were immersed not in judgment but in water, and the steam itself softened lines of hardship carved upon the skin. Returning from such excursions, the women carried more than bread or oil. They carried fragments of the city's breath. They brought back the smell of roasted nuts sold at corners, the sound of children playing with carved wooden toys, the sight of soldiers gathered in formation, their armor flashing in the noon sun. These impressions clung to them like unseen garments, binding them to Rome's vastness even as they returned to the confines of their narrow rooms. By midday the heat pressed heavily upon the walls. Shutters were drawn to ward off the glaring light, and the air within thickened with stillness. Some reclined in shadows, fanning themselves with folded cloth, their eyes half closed in weariness. Others busied their hands, stitching tears in tunics, braiding strands of hair, or polishing trinkets of glass and bronze. The hours passed not in silence but in subdued persistence, each task a small anchor against the monotony of waiting. From the street below came the cries of sellers, the bray of donkeys laden with goods, the distant echo of a flute played by some wandering performer. The city was never still, and its sounds penetrated even the most private corners, reminding those within that they were part of a living organism too vast to ignore. Rome breathed through every crack, every open window, every whisper carried by the wind. As the afternoon waned, a faint anticipation settled over the rooms. Oil was measured carefully, poured into the hollow bowls of lamps, the wicks trimmed for evening use. Garments of brighter hue were unfolded from their resting places, laid upon couches in preparation. Small vessels of perfume were opened, their contents applied sparingly to wrists, to the hollow of the throat, to hair that had been freshly combed. The transformation was subtle yet deliberate, the transition from daylight's concealment to night's unveiling. Shadows lengthened across the streets, and the city shifted once more into its nocturnal rhythm. Taverns filled with voices, dice clattered upon wooden tables, and the glow of torches marked the gathering of crowds near the circus and the amphitheater. The night was Rome's theater, and every street, every house, played its part. Within the modest house, the lamps were lit, their flames dancing against the painted plaster. The figures of gods and lovers upon the walls flickered as if alive, their movements animated by firelight. Cushions were arranged, wine poured into cups, and the air thickened with the mingled scents of oil and smoke. The women moved with practiced elegance, their gestures refined through repetition, their eyes steady even as they concealed the weight of fatigue. Visitors arrived, drawn by the familiar glow, by the promise that the house held. Their steps echoed against stone, their voices low at first, then louder as wine loosened restraint. The rooms filled with the hum of presence, with laughter that masked longing, with sighs that revealed weariness. The cycle repeated, as inevitable as the turning of day into night. Through it all, the women moved like shadows, their bodies instruments of performance, their minds elsewhere, wandering perhaps to distant memories, to dreams of quieter spaces. Yet the present demanded endurance, and endurance was what they offered, cloaked in the semblance of ease. Hours passed, measured by the slow depletion of oil in the lamps, by the deepening timbre of voices, by the fading energy of revelry. One by one, the visitors departed, their footsteps receding into the darkened streets. The lamps burned lower, the air grew cooler, and silence once more began to seep into the walls. When at last the final light was extinguished, the house lay again in stillness. Bodies stretched upon couches and mats, breaths deepened into sleep, and the weight of the city pressed gently through the silence. Another day had turned upon its axis, binding night to morning, labor to rest, in the endless rhythm of Rome. The new day began as so many before it, with the pale shimmer of light climbing over the rooftops and filtering through the narrow streets. Yet within the modest house near the Circus Maximus, the rhythm of dawn carried a weight different from the days before. The silence was familiar, the air thick with the same mingled scents of oil, straw, and fading perfume, but beneath that stillness lay presences more distinct. It was not the house itself that held the memory of time, but the women who moved within its walls, each bearing traces of a life carried into the present. Among them was one whose name, though spoken rarely, lingered in the minds of those who crossed her path: Livia. She was not young by the city's measure, her years approaching the full strength of 30, yet her presence was marked less by age than by composure. Her hair, dark and heavy, fell in waves when unbound, though a faint thread of silver had begun to mark her temples. Upon her cheek, near the line of the jaw, rested a small scar, a slender curve that drew the eye without disfiguring, a mark of some long-forgotten encounter. Her movements bore the discipline of habit, as though her limbs remembered years when order was expected and precision was necessity. She folded her garments with exactness, combed her hair until it gleamed, and arranged the room about her with quiet intent, as if tidiness itself were a shield against the disorder of circumstance. Beside her, in contrast, dwelled Fabia, whose youth still clung to her like the freshness of morning dew. She could scarcely have reached 20 summers, her frame lean and restless, her eyes quick and bright as though always searching. She carried with her a certain lightness, not of joy but of agility, moving swiftly between tasks, adjusting her tunic with deft fingers, braiding her hair into loose knots that fell apart almost as soon as they were tied. She was more careless with her possessions. Shawls strewn across couches, sandals dropped where she had stepped from them. Yet her laughter, quiet and brief, sometimes stirred even in this house where silence was the stronger companion. There was also Marcia, older still than Livia, her features softened by years, though her gaze remained sharp. Her body bore the marks of time more plainly, faint lines about her mouth, shoulders slightly stooped. Yet there was resilience in her stance. She had grown accustomed to labor, and her hands, though slender, carried the faint calluses of endless use. Marcia seldom adorned herself with excess. Her tunic was plain, her hair tied simply, her movements measured without haste. She was steady, like a stone in a current, resisting erosion though surrounded by change. Each woman bore her own rhythms, her own manner of inhabiting the narrow chambers, and together they formed a silent chorus, each note distinct yet blending into the whole. The house did not belong to any one of them, yet it was shaped by their presence, by the quiet rituals of their days and the endurance of their nights. As morning advanced, the women tended to their tasks. Livia knelt by a basin, dipping her fingers into cool water and smoothing it across her face with deliberate strokes. Fabia moved quickly about the room, fetching cloths, adjusting shutters, humming softly to herself a tune without words. Marcia settled upon a low stool, mending a tear in her garment with careful stitches, the needle gleaming faintly in the dim light. Their actions required no words. The rhythm of their coexistence was one of familiarity, a silent understanding born of necessity. Beyond their walls, the city carried on. The cries of sellers rose steadily, mingled with the clatter of carts upon the stones. The air carried the smell of baked bread, of roasting fish, of smoke rising from temple fires. A faint breeze stirred dust from the street, carrying with it the voices of children at play, the steady cadence of soldiers marching toward their posts. Rome unfolded itself as it always did, vast and unrelenting, indifferent to the lives contained within its alleys and courtyards. As the sun rose higher, the women prepared for the hours ahead. Some would remain within, resting or tending to small tasks. Others would step into the streets, veiled with shawls, their steps cautious yet steady. The baths offered respite, a place where steam and water eased weariness, where voices echoed against vaulted ceilings painted with faded gods. There, distinctions of rank blurred for a moment, and the body, stripped of ornament, was equal in its fragility. Livia moved through such spaces with quiet dignity, her scar half hidden by shadow, her composure intact. Fabia, by contrast, darted through with curious eyes, quick to notice, quick to whisper. Marcia lingered in the warmth, her breath slow, her silence unbroken. Returning to the house, the women carried not only bread or oil but also fragments of Rome itself. Livia returned with olives wrapped in cloth, their scent sharp and earthy. Fabia carried figs, their skins soft and fragrant, tasting of late summer. Marcia bore a small vessel of oil, its surface cool against her palm, its promise the steady flame of evening lamps. These offerings were placed carefully upon a table worn by years of use, each item a reminder that life, however circumscribed, required its sustenance. The afternoon pressed upon them with heat, the shutters closed once more, the air within heavy and still. Some reclined in rest, their breaths slowing into near sleep. Others busied themselves with preparation, arranging garments, untangling strands of hair, polishing small ornaments of glass or bronze. Livia smoothed her tunic with methodical care, aligning each fold. Fabia experimented with knots and pins, adjusting her hair into shapes that would catch the lamplight later in the night. Marcia, steady as ever, ensured that the lamps were filled with oil, that the wicks were trimmed, that the flame, when lit, would burn true. As evening descended, the transformation began once more. Tunics of brighter hue were drawn from their resting places, sashes tied, perfumes applied sparingly yet with precision. The room shifted under the glow of lamps, the painted figures upon the walls stirred by flickering light. The air thickened with expectancy, with the subtle tension of anticipation. Visitors arrived with the night, their steps resounding against stone, their presence altering the rhythm of the house. Some came with haste, eager for distraction, others with hesitation, burdened by their own silence. They were men of varied station, merchants weary from trade, soldiers still bearing the scent of dust and iron, clerks whose fingers were stained with ink, strangers from distant provinces speaking with accents shaped by far-off coasts. Each brought his own shadow, his own breath, his own measure of need. The women received them with practiced composure. Livia, with her quiet dignity, offered steadiness, her gaze unflinching, her movements precise. Fabia, quick and restless, drew eyes with her laughter, brief and light as the flutter of a bird. Marcia, calm and unhurried, carried with her the reassurance of presence, the comfort of endurance. Each fulfilled a role not chosen but shaped by necessity, each becoming part of the fabric that sustained the house. The night deepened, voices rose and fell, laughter mingled with sighs, the air heavy with wine and smoke. The lamps burned steadily, their flames consuming the oil, their light casting shadows that danced upon the plaster. Time passed not in minutes but in rhythms, the rhythm of footsteps across the floor, of bodies reclining, of silences that lingered after voices ceased. And as always, the night waned. One by one, the visitors departed, their steps fading into the darkened streets. The lamps burned lower, their oil nearly spent, their flames shrinking to faint embers. The women, weary, removed their adornments, unpinned their hair, folded their garments once more. The house settled into quiet, into stillness, into the slow exhale of sleep. Another day had passed, another cycle complete. Yet within the silence, the presence of Livia, of Fabia, of Marcia lingered, each carrying into the next dawn the memory of endurance, the quiet strength of those who lived not in marble halls nor in the pages of triumph, but in the unseen corners of Rome's vast, unyielding heart. The rhythm of Rome never ceased. Even when night seemed to claim the streets, even when silence spread across courtyards and the Tiber moved like a sheet of darkened glass, the city breathed beneath its stillness. At dawn it exhaled again, steady and inevitable, drawing from its countless dwellings the lives that sustained it. Within the modest house by the Circus Maximus, the air shifted once more with the rising of the sun. The night's labors had left their trace, the scent of extinguished lamps, the faint stickiness of spilled wine upon the floor, the quiet weight of bodies that stirred slowly back to wakefulness. Yet the morning held not only familiar gestures and routines, but also the presence of others, new figures whose movements and habits added their own threads to the fabric of the house. Among them was Sulpicia, whose youth was already touched by weariness, though she had scarcely reached 25. Her hair was of a pale hue, unusual among the darker tresses of her companions, and it caught the light of morning in a way that seemed to soften her features. Yet her eyes carried something heavier, a shadow of experience beyond her years, a gaze that lingered not upon what was present but upon something distant. She was often slow in her movements, not from laziness but from a deliberation that seemed almost defensive, as though conserving strength was a habit she had long ago adopted. When she bathed, she lingered in the water longer than most, as if to cleanse more than the dust of the city. When she dressed, she adjusted her garments not for allure but for protection, her shawls drawn close even in the heat. There was also Drusilla, in contrast, whose presence filled a room not through volume but through vibrancy. She was not tall, her body compact, her gestures quick and decisive, yet there was something in her that spoke of defiance. Her laugh, sharp and sudden, cut through silence like a knife. Her stride carried a firmness that ignored the uneven stones of the street. She adorned herself with boldness even when the materials were poor, glass beads polished to a faint shine, cheap bronze pins arranged with pride. She seemed to resist the weight of circumstance through sheer insistence, her vitality an act of endurance in itself. Another figure often seen within the house was Tyro, a freedman whose role was not to share in its nightly labors but to manage the quieter necessities. He was neither young nor old, his face weathered by sun and smoke, his hands hardened by years of service. Once he had belonged to another household, his freedom purchased by coin he had not earned himself but been granted through the will of a patron. Now he remained close to places like this one, where his strength and his watchful eyes found use. He swept the floors after nights of revelry, tended to lamps, fetched wine from nearby vendors, and occasionally stood at the threshold to ensure that order was kept. He spoke little, yet his silence carried authority, a reminder that the house, however humble, remained part of the greater machinery of Rome's laws and customs. For such houses were not beyond the city's notice. Prostitution, though seldom celebrated in the rhetoric of senators and poets, was woven firmly into Rome's social fabric. It was regulated, taxed, observed by magistrates who recorded names in ledgers, ensuring that those who practiced the trade were marked by law. A woman such as Livia or Marcia or Sulpicia might be listed among those registries, her identity reduced to lines of ink in an archive that few would ever see. Yet that record ensured that her existence, however shadowed, was acknowledged by the state itself. To be a meretrix was not to be invisible, but to be seen in a way that was fixed, limited, and inescapable. This knowledge shaped the rhythms of their days. They lived not only for the evenings of labor, but within a broader system that reached into every corner of Rome. Priests offered prayers to Venus, and sacrifices of doves or incense were laid upon her altars. Soldiers, returning from campaigns, carried coin not only to taverns but to the doorways of houses like this one, seeking in the company of women a brief reprieve from discipline. Magistrates, scribes, merchants, sailors, all found their way through these narrow lanes, each carrying with him the dust of his own life, each leaving behind something unseen. A fragment of breath, a weight of memory, a trace upon the soul of the house. The women felt these presences not as isolated moments, but as a continuum. Sulpicia remembered the soldier with the scar upon his forehead, who drank too much wine and wept silently before sleep. Drusilla recalled the merchant who spoke of far-off ports, whose hands smelled of resin and spice. Livia, steady as ever, thought of the clerk whose ink-stained fingers traced the lines of her arm as if reading a document. These memories lingered not because they were extraordinary, but because they blended into the rhythm of repetition, shaping the way time itself was experienced. Daylight hours brought their own forms of endurance. The baths remained a place of cleansing, of watching, of silent exchange. Markets carried the ever-shifting sense of produce, fish, herbs, and meat, their stalls alive with color and sound. Temples stood open, their steps worn smooth by countless feet, their columns rising like trees into the sky. In these spaces, the women moved not as performers but as participants in the city's greater pulse, their presence both ordinary and marked. Marcia, in her steadiness, often lingered near temples, watching as sacrifices were made, as incense smoke curled upward into the light. Fabia delighted in markets, her quick hands touching bolts of dyed wool, her sharp eyes following the movements of craftsmen. Drusilla was drawn to the baths, where her laughter echoed against stone, her defiance visible even amid steam. Livia remained composed wherever she walked, her discipline a cloak that seemed to separate her from both pity and judgment. As weeks unfolded into months, festivals marked the passage of time. The Floralia, held in honor of Flora, filled the streets with color, with garlands of flowers, with performances that blurred the line between celebration and indulgence. The Saturnalia, later in the year, overturned order itself, masters serving slaves, laughter rising from every quarter. On such days the house was busier than ever, its chambers filled with the overflow of revelry, the wine flowing faster, the lamps burning longer. These festivals bound the house not only to its own cycle but to the calendar of Rome, linking its walls to the wider tides of the empire. Through all of this, Tyro remained a constant presence. He fetched the garlands hung in the doorway during festivals, ensured that the lamps were trimmed and filled, and sometimes, when drunken voices grew too loud, he stood in quiet authority until calm returned. He was a reminder that even here, within walls painted with Venus and Bacchus, order had its place, that the empire's reach extended even into the most intimate corners. The women endured as they always had. Their lives unfolded in cycles, yet within those cycles each carried her own rhythm. Sulpicia, with her distant eyes, found solace in small rituals of bathing, of arranging her garments just so, of lingering in the warmth of the sun. Drusilla lived in bursts of laughter, of sharp gestures, of bold adornment that turned cheap glass into something radiant. Livia maintained her composure, folding garments with care, moving with steadiness that defied disorder. Marcia, steady and quiet, stitched garments, trimmed wicks, polished vessels. Fabia, restless, darted between tasks, her quickness both her strength and her burden. Together, they shaped the life of the house, each note blending into the unceasing song of Rome. When night returned, as it always did, lamps were lit, visitors came and went, voices rose and fell. The city outside breathed in its endless cycle, and within these walls, lives continued, unseen by history's grand records, yet essential to the pulse of the world's greatest empire. Another day ended, another night passed, and in the silence that followed, the weight of existence lingered like the faint scent of oil upon plaster, like the dim glow of embers fading into darkness. The morning light spilled over the rooftops of Rome, touching the tiled surfaces with a pale warmth. Within the narrow streets, the city stirred quietly. Bakers coaxed bread from their ovens, smoke curling into the sky. Merchants arranged their wares with care, and the distant clang of metal upon metal marked the smiths at work. The air carried the mingled scents of fresh bread, roasting fish, herbs, and the faint tang of the river. Inside the modest house by the Circus Maximus, the women began their day as always, moving with the rhythm learned over countless repetitions. Livia rose first, stepping lightly onto the worn wooden floor, her bare feet making only the faintest sound. She carried a basin of water to the corner of the room, dipping her fingers and spreading the cool liquid over her skin. Each movement was deliberate, measured, a choreography of habit. She adjusted the folds of her tunic, tied her hair in a simple knot, and moved to straighten the cushions upon which the others slept. Fabia stirred next, her movements quicker, less precise but equally necessary. She fetched a cloth from a low shelf and began to dust the surface of a table, brushing away the remnants of last night's offerings. Spilled wine, crumbs of bread, the faint stickiness of oil. She glanced briefly toward the doorway, where the morning light spilled unevenly, and returned to her task with a small hum, a tune without words. Marcia, steady as ever, sat upon a stool near the hearth, tending to the vessels that held oil and water. Her hands moved with care, wiping the rims, trimming the wicks, ensuring each would burn evenly come evening. She checked the storage of wine, noting the level in each jar, and placed them in a corner where they would remain cool and undisturbed until nightfall. Sulpicia emerged from her corner, carrying a small basket of dried figs and olives purchased from the street vendor whose stall she had visited the previous day. She arranged the fruits neatly upon the table, inspecting each for softness or blemish. Drusilla followed soon after, her movements brisk, balancing a bowl of water upon her hip as she swept the floor. The women worked in harmony, each action complementing the other, their presence turning the house into a living, breathing space shaped by their care and persistence. Beyond the walls, the city continued its slow awakening. The streets carried the clatter of carts, the voices of vendors calling out their wares, the bray of donkeys and the occasional cry of children playing. The sound of distant hammers striking metal echoed from the smiths' shops. Rome's pulse was steady, measured, unrelenting, and every movement within the house responded to it. As the sun climbed higher, the house took on its midday weight. Windows were opened to catch the light and air, though shutters were adjusted to shield against the heat. Livia moved to the small garden outside the rear wall, where herbs were grown in clay pots. She touched each plant, trimming where necessary, gathering sprigs of mint and rosemary to be used in cooking or baths. Fabia carried water from a basin to refill the pots, her hands steady despite their haste. Marcia checked the lamps once more, ensuring no residue of oil remained spilled on the floorboards, and Sulpicia arranged the fruits for the afternoon meals. New figures appeared in the routine of the house. A vendor arrived carrying clay jars of wine, his leather sandals dusty from the street. He set the jars down carefully, noting the house's residents without need for words, and left as quietly as he had come. Tyro, the freedman who maintained the house's order, passed through to inspect the storage, his presence marked by the sound of worn leather and the careful placement of keys upon his belt. He ensured that the jars were secure, the doors fastened, and the lamps ready for evening use. By midday, the house was alive with quiet activity. Some women bathed in small basins of warm water, the steam rising gently around them, softening the light and blurring the edges of their reflections in the bronze mirrors. Others prepared garments, washing and folding, brushing dirt and dust from the tunics and shawls. Drusilla polished the glass beads she wore, while Sulpicia arranged her hair simply yet neatly, securing it with pins that gleamed faintly in the sun. Livia moved between tasks, adjusting, smoothing, ensuring the balance of the room remained undisturbed. From the street outside came the hum of commerce and labor. The baker placed fresh loaves upon his stall, the scent of warm bread drifting upward. A merchant carried figs and dates, setting them carefully beside his wares. Soldiers passed information, their armor clinking softly, leaving behind a trace of metal and sweat in the air. The women observed these passages without pause, noting the rhythms, the repeated steps, the constant flow of life beyond their walls. Afternoon shadows lengthened, and the house adjusted once more. Cushions were straightened, pots of oil checked, floors swept. The women moved with methodical care, preparing for the evening's arrival. Lamps were filled, their wicks trimmed, garments of brighter hue laid upon couches. Small dishes of honey and bread were arranged on tables, the air lightly scented with herbs and oils. Every action was purposeful, ensuring that when night came, the house would be ready to receive those who sought it. Visitors arrived as the sun dipped toward the horizon. Some came quietly, their steps careful, eyes downcast, carrying themselves with the weight of business or duty. Others were more boisterous, laughing, speaking loudly, leaving traces of wine and coin upon the table. The women greeted them with movements practiced through repetition. Livia with calm precision, Fabia with lightness and speed, Marcia with quiet steadiness, Sulpicia with attentive care, and Drusilla with a vibrancy that drew the eye. Throughout the evening, the house maintained its rhythm. The lamps cast dancing shadows across the walls, painted with figures of Venus and Bacchus, their presence both decoration and reminder. Wine was poured, bread broken, and the actions of the house unfolded in a quiet choreography. Gestures of service, preparation, adjustment, attention to detail. Each movement mattered, though no one spoke it aloud. Beyond the walls, Rome continued unabated. The cries of vendors, the steps of soldiers, the laughter of children and merchants mixed with the distant clatter of the amphitheater and the circus. Smoke rose from ovens and temples, mingling with the river's faint mist. The city's pulse reached every corner, yet within the house, the women maintained their own beat, measured and deliberate. Night deepened, and visitors departed, one by one. Wine cups emptied, lamps burned low, and the air cooled. The women removed the brighter garments, folded shawls, brushed hair, and tended to lamps one final time. Tyro ensured the doors were secure, sweeping the floors and checking the vessels of oil. The city outside quieted, though the distant hum of life remained, a constant reminder of the world beyond these walls. As the house settled into darkness, its occupants reclined upon couches and mats, bodies heavy with the day's labors. The lamps burned their last, flickering softly, before giving way to shadow. The house breathed once more in quiet, its rhythm now slower, deeper, in harmony with the night outside. Another day had passed, another cycle completed. Life continued, uninterrupted, measured not in extraordinary events but in the steady persistence of daily action. The women, the house, and the city all moved in tandem, each motion part of a greater whole. The continuity of labor, preparation, and care bound them to the pulse of Rome, invisible threads connecting every action to the world beyond the narrow streets. In the final stillness, the faint glow of embers in the hearth, the subtle scent of oil and herbs, and the quiet alignment of cushions and vessels carried the house through the night. The women slept, the city slept, and the world, vast and unyielding, exhaled in a rhythm older than memory, awaiting the next morning when the same patterns would begin anew. The day began in the faint light that sifted through the shutters, pale and soft upon the worn wooden floors. Within the house, the women stirred, each moving with the rhythm established through countless mornings. Livia rose first, her steps measured, carrying a basin of water to the corner of the room. She dipped her fingers and spread the cool liquid across her face and arms, the motion deliberate, as if drawing clarity from the touch of water itself. Fabia followed soon after, gathering cloths and wiping down surfaces. She moved with quickness, brushing dust from the table, the benches, and the low shelves that held small jars and vessels. Her eyes shifted constantly, noting the slight tilt of a pot, the uneven fold of a cloth, the position of a lamp. Even in routine, she found motion, her hands busy though her mind remained calm, focused on the task at hand. Marcia sat upon her low stool, inspecting the vessels of oil and water, filling lamps, trimming wicks, and arranging them neatly on the tables. Her fingers were steady, practiced, moving with care that had become instinctual over the years. Sulpicia carried a small basket of fruits, carefully placing each olive and fig in rows upon the table. Drusilla, lively even in the early hours, swept the floor with broad movements, scattering dust toward the corners, and then returning the broom to its place with a quiet flourish. The women's movements interwove seamlessly, a silent choreography in which each knew the steps of the other. They spoke little, yet their presence was enough. The rhythm of their actions communicated understanding. When Livia poured water into a basin, Fabia ensured the cloths were clean and within reach. When Marcia set the lamps upon the table, Sulpicia arranged the fruits nearby, creating balance and order in the space. Drusilla's sweeping stirred the air, carrying away the remnants of the previous night, leaving the floor bare and smooth beneath their feet. Outside, the streets began to hum with life. Vendors opened stalls, their voices calling softly, the clatter of carts echoing against stone. The smell of baking bread mingled with smoke from distant ovens. Soldiers marched in small detachments, their armor catching the sunlight, while children ran and played, their laughter carrying over the walls of the house. The rhythm of the city was steady, unyielding, and the women moved within it, aware yet undisturbed, responding to its currents with careful precision. By mid-morning, some of the women prepared to leave the house for the baths. Livia carried a small vessel of oil, Sulpicia gathered cloths, and Fabia adjusted the folds of her tunic. Drusilla led the way, stepping lightly down the stairs, while Marcia ensured that the lamps were filled and vessels placed securely before following. The baths, a short walk through narrow alleys, awaited them, a space where the water ran warm and the air steamed with quiet energy. Inside the baths, the women moved with ease among other visitors. The floors were smooth stone, damp beneath their feet, and the air carried the scent of oil, herbs, and faint sweat. They washed, scrubbed, and anointed themselves, each motion precise and unhurried. Livia poured warm water over her shoulders, feeling the motion flow from hands to body, while Sulpicia arranged the herbs into the basin, letting their scent rise into the warm air. Fabia brushed her hair, combing it carefully, while Drusilla arranged her tunic and adjusted the folds of her shawl. Marcia attended to the vessels nearby, ensuring that each lamp and jar remained in place, ready for their return to the house. Other figures moved through the baths, merchants with ink-stained fingers, soldiers with the smell of iron upon their arms, and laborers whose bodies bore the imprint of the sun and work. The women's presence was noted, observed subtly, but always within the accepted order of the space. Interactions were quiet, gestures polite, measured, each touch and movement deliberate. A nod here, a glance there, the placement of a hand on a vessel. These small motions conveyed recognition without words. Returning to the house, the women carried not only water and oil, but the subtle traces of the baths, the warmth upon their skin, the scent of herbs, the faint shimmer of damp hair. They set these items carefully upon the tables, arranging them with the same precision as the morning. The air inside the house carried the faint scent of citrus and rosemary, mixed with the lingering aromas of the street beyond. Visitors began to arrive as the afternoon drew on. Some entered quietly, stepping over the threshold with caution, their eyes lowering in respect. Others were more casual, carrying small coins, bread, or wine as offerings, placing them upon the table with careful hands. The women greeted them with movements practiced and measured. Livia with calm composure, Fabia with swift attentiveness, Marcia with quiet steadiness, Sulpicia with careful care, and Drusilla with the lightness of presence that drew attention. The interactions followed a rhythm. A hand offered wine, another brushed dust from a garment. One visitor removed a cloak and set it aside. Another adjusted the folds of his tunic. The women's movements were steady, ensuring the comfort and balance of the house. They moved between tables and couches, adjusting vessels, straightening cushions, and arranging the small objects of daily life. Tyro, the freedman, oversaw the smooth unfolding of these actions, stepping quietly through the rooms to attend to needs unseen, ensuring order and preparedness at every turn. As the afternoon progressed, shadows lengthened within the rooms. Light filtered through shutters, casting long patterns across the floor. Livia adjusted lamps, ensuring the wicks were trimmed. Fabia moved swiftly to align cushions and fold garments. Drusilla arranged small ornaments to catch the glow. Sulpicia checked the baskets of fruit. Marcia monitored the oil vessels. Each action was small, yet together they maintained the harmony of the house. Evening came, and the house shifted into the rhythm of night. Lamps were lit, casting soft light upon walls painted with gods and symbols. Visitors arrived in greater number, some bringing wine, others coins or small gifts. Their footsteps echoed upon the floors, their presence altering the air subtly. The women moved among them with practiced ease, ensuring that each visitor's need was attended to, that each space remained orderly. Livia's calm movements guided the flow. Fabia's quick hands adjusted garments and objects. Drusilla's vibrant presence drew attention naturally. Sulpicia arranged offerings and refreshments. Marcia maintained stability and preparedness. The visitors' actions were measured as well. Coins were placed on tables. Garments were removed and hung. Hands rested lightly upon vessels or cushions. The women responded in kind, creating an environment of balance, subtle energy, and quiet engagement. Even within these interactions, no words were needed beyond the minimal. Every movement carried meaning. Every gesture communicated intention. Night deepened, and the house settled into its patterns. Visitors departed one by one, leaving traces of scent, sound, and coin behind. The women removed adornments, folded garments, arranged cushions, and tended lamps one final time. Tyro ensured the doors were secure, sweeping the floors and adjusting vessels. The city outside hushed gradually, though the faint murmur of streets and distant voices continued, a reminder of the vast world beyond the walls. Once the last light faded, the house exhaled into quiet. The soft scent of oil and herbs lingered. Cushions lay in careful order, vessels were filled and trimmed, and the floor was bare, swept clean. The women reclined upon mats and couches, their bodies heavy with the day's work. The lamp's embers glowed faintly, then diminished, leaving only shadow. Another day passed in the quiet rhythm of life. Actions, duties, and small gestures maintained the order and continuity of the house. The women, the visitors, the freedmen, and the city beyond each contributed to the pattern that sustained the house. Life unfolded, steady and unbroken, measured not in dramatic events but in the deliberate, patient rhythm of daily existence. Morning arrived quietly, spilling pale light through the shutters of the modest house near the Circus Maximus. The streets outside hummed softly with early commerce, the distant clatter of carts and calls of vendors blending with the faint murmur of the river. Within the walls, the women began their day as they had countless mornings before, each movement precise, deliberate, and unhurried. Livia rose first, stepping lightly to the corner where a basin of water waited. She poured cool water over her hands and face, feeling the steady weight of morning settle into her motions. Fabia followed shortly after, sweeping the floor and arranging cushions, ensuring the rooms were neat and prepared for the day ahead. Marcia tended to the lamps and vessels of oil, while Sulpicia arranged small baskets of fruits and Drusilla gathered garments and shawls, adjusting folds and pins with a practiced eye. The women's movements interlaced seamlessly, a silent communication of routine and purpose. Livia's hands smoothed surfaces as Fabia adjusted cushions nearby. Marcia's attention to the lamps allowed Sulpicia to set fruits with precision. Drusilla moved through the spaces with a quiet flourish that completed the rhythm. Even in silence, they worked together, each action anticipating the next. their shared knowledge of the house's order evident in every gesture. Visitors arrived gradually as the sun climbed higher. A merchant carrying small coins and a pouch of dried figs stepped cautiously inside. His eyes flicked across the room, noting the arrangements of cushions and vessels, while the women responded with practiced gestures. Livia guided him toward a seat with a slight motion of her hand. Fabia offered a small bowl of water. Sulpicia placed a few fruits within reach. Marcia adjusted a lamp nearby. Drusilla arranged a shawl over the edge of the couch, her movements light and precise. Each gesture spoke of welcome and order, unspoken yet fully understood. Another visitor, a soldier recently returned from the outskirts of the city, entered with the clang of armor and the faint scent of iron upon his skin. The women responded to his presence with equal care. Livia moved first, gesturing toward a seat with gentle assurance. Fabia brushed the dust from a nearby table, setting a small cup of wine within reach. Marcia checked the lamps and adjusted a vessel of oil, ensuring the room's illumination remained even. Sulpicia placed a plate of bread and figs on the table, while Drusilla's hands smoothed the folds of the soldier's cloak. The interactions were deliberate and measured, a choreography of attention that required no words. Throughout the morning, the house remained alive with quiet motion. Visitors came and went, each with their own manner, their own small offerings, and the women moved among them with ease. Livia guided, Fabia arranged, Marcia maintained, Sulpicia served, and Drusilla drew attention with her light movements. The pattern was constant, each action both independent and part of a greater whole. By midday, preparations shifted toward the afternoon's needs. The women arranged fruits and bread, trimmed lamps, and checked vessels of oil and water. Drusilla carried a small bowl of warm water for a visitor who had arrived early, while Fabia adjusted cushions and aligned chairs. Livia moved between tasks, ensuring balance and order. Sulpicia arranged fresh figs. Marcia checked that every lamp was steady and secure. Tyro, the freedman, moved quietly among them, checking doors, aligning jars, and sweeping floors. As the afternoon deepened, the house saw a greater influx of visitors. A merchant with packages of cloth arrived, setting his goods carefully upon a table while the women responded with attention. Drusilla adjusted the folds of his cloak. Fabia moved items into neat stacks. Livia offered a seat. Marcia ensured a lamp provided clear light. Sulpicia placed a small bowl of water for his comfort. Every movement was subtle, interlaced, a dance of preparation and response. Another figure entered, a man bearing wine in a clay jug. His hands were rough, fingers stained with use, yet he carried himself with care. The women responded as they always had. Livia guided him gently to a couch. Fabia brushed a table clear. Marcia positioned a lamp. Sulpicia arranged a plate of bread and figs. Drusilla smoothed the folds of the man's tunic. Their movements were synchronized, deliberate, each anticipating the next. Throughout the house, the rhythm continued. Visitors shifted, seating themselves, adjusting garments, setting small offerings upon tables. The women responded without haste, each motion precise. Livia poured wine with care. Fabia adjusted cushions and rugs. Marcia trimmed wicks. Sulpicia offered fruits. Drusilla's hands moved lightly, ensuring order and comfort. Even in the presence of many, the women maintained the balance and flow, the quiet pulse of the house. The afternoons often brought unexpected interruptions, yet the women adapted seamlessly. A courier delivering letters stepped within the doorway. A small group of travelers rested briefly before continuing their journey. A merchant's assistant dropped a package of herbs. Each figure was attended to with gestures of guidance and service. Livia moved with assurance, Fabia with speed, Marcia with steadiness, Sulpicia with attentive care. Drusilla with a light flourish that drew notice. The house, alive with subtle motion, accommodated each without breaking its rhythm. As evening approached, preparations shifted again. Lamps were trimmed, cushions adjusted, and small trays of bread and fruit were placed for visitors expected at dusk. The women moved with quiet efficiency, ensuring the house was prepared for the night. Tyro checked doors, jars, and the alignment of vessels, moving unobtrusively through the rooms. The city outside grew quieter, the sun dipping low, casting long shadows across the floors. Visitors began arriving in larger numbers as night fell. A trader with packages of silk entered, carefully placing them upon a table while the women arranged seating and refreshments. Another, a soldier from a distant camp, stepped in with armor clinking softly. The women responded with coordinated gestures, ensuring comfort and order. Each movement, pouring wine, adjusting a cushion, offering bread, was deliberate, careful, and precise. The interactions between women and visitors continued through the night. Livia guided with calm assurance. Fabia moved swiftly to arrange and adjust. Marcia maintained stability and readiness. Sulpicia served with care. Drusilla brought attention and grace to each gesture. Visitors responded in turn, placing offerings, adjusting garments, and maintaining the balance of the room. The house functioned as a living, ordered space, its rhythm continuous, unbroken. Late into the night, as the last visitors departed, the women tended lamps and vessels one final time. Cushions were straightened, tables cleared, and the air settled with the faint scent of oil and herbs. Tyro ensured the doors were secure, floors swept, and jars aligned. The house exhaled into quiet, its occupants resting from the day's steady rhythm. Even in the stillness, the pattern of the house persisted. The women, the visitors, the freedmen, and the surrounding streets all contributed to the ongoing pulse, a continuous motion of care, preparation, and interaction. Life unfolded in deliberate steps, measured and consistent, each action reinforcing the stability and order of the home. Another day concluded, yet the rhythm remained. The house, alive with history, motion, and quiet attention, settled into the calm of night. Its occupants rested, lamps dimmed, and the city beyond continued its steady, imperceptible motion. Within the walls, the continuity of life persisted, measured in deliberate actions, shared duties, and the silent communication that guided every movement. Soft light filtered through the shutters, spilling across the worn wooden floors and illuminating the quiet movement of the women. Each motion carried the weight of routine and precision. Livia moved among the cushions, adjusting their placement and smoothing the folds of the tunics resting upon them. Fabia followed, sweeping the floor and aligning small vessels, ensuring that each object lay exactly where it belonged. Marcia attended to the lamps and oil, trimming wicks and checking the flow of light, while Sulpicia arranged the fruits and bread upon the tables. Drusilla moved lightly, folding garments, adjusting shawls, and setting small ornaments to catch the sun's gentle glow. Visitors arrived gradually, each bringing a subtle shift to the rhythm of the house. A merchant entered, carrying a bundle of cloth, and the women responded with silent attentiveness. Livia guided him to a seat with a graceful motion of her hand. Fabia adjusted the table beneath his wares, aligning the edges of folded fabrics. Marcia positioned a lamp to illuminate the colors and textures, while Sulpicia placed a small plate of figs nearby. Drusilla smoothed the folds of the merchant's cloak, ensuring both comfort and order. Each gesture was deliberate, part of the quiet choreography that defined the house. A soldier entered next, bearing the scent of iron and travel. The women's movements adjusted subtly, shifting to accommodate his presence. Livia's hand beckoned toward a low couch. Fabia brushed crumbs from the table. Marcia checked that the lamps shone evenly across the space. Sulpicia offered a bowl of water. Drusilla adjusted the folds of the soldier's tunic. The room responded as a single entity, balancing light, motion, and presence. Through the hours, visitors continued to arrive. A trader carrying wine in clay jars, a scribe with folded parchments, a freedman delivering messages. Each was attended to with care, gestures precise, movements harmonious. Livia guided, Fabia adjusted, Marcia maintained stability, Sulpicia served, Drusilla brought attention and order. Coins were placed on tables, garments adjusted, cups of wine poured, all without a word spoken. The rhythm of the house held steady, the women moving as extensions of the space itself. Interactions among the women became more evident as tasks multiplied. Livia poured wine while Fabia adjusted cushions nearby. Drusilla smoothed garments as Sulpicia refilled small bowls with fruit. Marcia moved between tables and lamps, ensuring light and stability. Their movements overlapped seamlessly, a silent communication of attention and care. Each anticipated the next, each completed the other's motions, the house alive with quiet coordination. Visitors' gestures prompted subtle shifts in the women's actions. A merchant laid down his coins and removed his cloak. Drusilla adjusted the folds while Fabia swept crumbs from the table. A soldier drank from a cup. Sulpicia refilled it without pause. A traveler shifted a bundle of herbs. Livia guided it to a stable place. Marcia ensured lamps shone evenly. Fabia adjusted cushions nearby. The women's attentiveness wove through the day, each action part of a continuous flow. When a group arrived from the markets, bringing small wares and baskets of food, the house adapted smoothly. Livia gestured toward seating. Fabia aligned the tables. Marcia checked lamps. Sulpicia arranged fruits, and Drusilla cleared space for movement. The visitors placed their goods carefully, exchanging small gestures and coins with precise timing, their actions harmonizing with the women's continuous rhythm. Preparation for the evening began gradually as shadows stretched along the floors. Cushions were straightened, small plates of bread and figs arranged, vessels of oil checked and refilled. Livia moved between spaces, smoothing folds and adjusting the placement of chairs. Fabia aligned tables and swept floors. Marcia ensured lamps burned evenly, casting steady light. Sulpicia replenished fruits and water, while Drusilla adjusted garments and shawls, all movements measured and exact. Evening visitors brought a greater complexity of interactions. A soldier with a bundle of letters needed assistance with seating and refreshments. A merchant carrying wine and figs sought space to place his wares. A traveler arriving late required water and a lamp near his seat. Each situation was met with coordinated movements among the women. Livia guided hands and gestures with calm assurance. Fabia arranged surfaces and objects. Marcia maintained light and balance. Sulpicia served and replenished. Drusilla adjusted garments and provided order. The house functioned as a single entity, responsive and alive, each woman's action supporting the others. Throughout the night, subtle adjustments marked the continued presence of visitors. Coins were exchanged, cups refilled, garments straightened, cushions repositioned. The women responded quickly yet without haste, their movements fluid and deliberate. Livia poured wine. Fabia adjusted the folds of fabric. Marcia checked lamps. Sulpicia served bread and fruit. Drusilla ensured comfort and order. Each motion anticipated the next, the rhythm unbroken even as new figures arrived or departed. By late evening, the flow of visitors began to diminish. The women moved to tidy spaces, clear tables, and check lamps. Drusilla folded garments and arranged shawls. Fabia brushed crumbs from surfaces and realigned cushions. Marcia trimmed wicks, checked oil vessels, and maintained steady light. Sulpicia replenished bowls of fruit and water, while Livia oversaw the alignment of spaces, ensuring balance and readiness for the night. Tyro moved through the house quietly, sweeping floors, aligning jars, and checking that doors were secure. The last visitors departed, leaving subtle traces. A coin on a table, a cloak draped over a chair, a faint scent of wine or herbs. The house exhaled into quiet, the rhythm slowing but never breaking. As the lamps dimmed, shadows stretched across the walls, the painted figures of Venus and Bacchus faintly visible in the glow. The women reclined upon mats and couches, bodies relaxed yet attentive even in rest. The house carried the residue of the day. The warmth of lamps, the scent of herbs and oil, the alignment of cushions and vessels. Life continued through the night in the silent rhythm of order and care. Even as darkness enveloped the streets beyond, the house maintained its pulse. Every object, every gesture, every folded garment testified to the coordinated attention of the women. Visitors' needs, once present, now became traces of a past rhythm, absorbed into the structure of the house. Each action contributed to the continuity of life, a persistent, deliberate motion that connected women, visitors, and the city beyond. Another day concluded, but the rhythm of care and interaction endured. The women, the freedmen, the visitors, and the streets outside each played a part in the ongoing flow. In silence, in measured motion, the house maintained its presence and purpose. The pulse of life continued, steady and unbroken, awaiting the new variations of action and interaction that the next day would bring. Shadows lingered across the walls as the house settled into the rhythm of early activity, subtle movements carrying life through each room. Livia adjusted cushions near the entrance, ensuring the spaces for visitors were ready before they arrived. Fabia swept the floor, careful to move dust into corners without disturbing the alignment of the tables or vessels. Marcia checked lamps and oil, trimming wicks where necessary, while Sulpicia arranged small plates of figs and bread upon low tables. Drusilla moved lightly among garments and shawls, smoothing folds and placing items within easy reach. Visitors arrived with varied presents, each introducing a new rhythm to the day. A merchant carrying bolts of cloth entered first, carefully setting them upon a table. Livia guided him to a bench, her hands moving with gentle assurance. Fabia aligned the edges of his fabrics, ensuring their display was neat and accessible. Marcia positioned a lamp to illuminate the colors and textures, while Sulpicia offered a plate of figs. Drusilla adjusted the folds of the merchant's cloak, smoothing creases and ensuring comfort. Their coordinated movements maintained the order of the house, integrating the new figure without breaking the ongoing rhythm. A soldier arrived next, his armor clinking softly as he stepped into the space. The women adjusted instinctively. Livia guided him toward a low couch. Fabia brushed the table clear of crumbs. Marcia ensured lamps cast steady light. Sulpicia offered water in a small cup, and Drusilla adjusted his tunic and cloak with gentle care. Each gesture anticipated the next, movements overlapping seamlessly, creating a pattern of attention and balance that responded to the presence of the visitor. As more figures arrived, the women adapted continuously. A traveler bearing a bundle of herbs required space for his wares. A freedman carrying coins sought guidance for placement and rest. A merchant with wine jugs needed assistance in arranging his containers. Livia moved fluidly among them, guiding hands and attention. Fabia aligned tables and cleared surfaces. Marcia maintained light and stability. Sulpicia served refreshments, while Drusilla adjusted garments, shawls, and small objects with a light flourish. The house absorbed the presence of each visitor, each interaction adding nuance to the ongoing rhythm. Visitors' actions prompted further shifts in movement. Coins were placed carefully upon tables. Cups of wine were filled and passed. Garments were removed, folded, and arranged. The women responded without haste, each motion deliberate and precise. Livia poured wine while Fabia adjusted cushions. Marcia checked oil vessels and lamp positions. Sulpicia replenished small plates of figs and bread. Drusilla smoothed folds of garments and shawls, maintaining balance and order throughout the house. Small disruptions were met with coordinated response. A package dropped lightly upon the floor. A traveler adjusted a bundle of herbs awkwardly. A merchant spilled a bit of wine upon the table. Each incident was handled seamlessly. Livia guided the adjustment. Fabia cleared or aligned items. Marcia checked the illumination. Sulpicia replaced or replenished food and drink. And Drusilla restored garments or cloths to their proper arrangement. The rhythm persisted, unbroken. Each woman's movement both independent and part of the collective flow. As afternoon deepened, the flow of visitors increased. A group of merchants arrived together, placing bundles of cloth and coins upon the tables. Livia motioned toward seating. Fabia arranged cushions. Marcia ensured even illumination. Sulpicia replenished bowls of fruit and bread, and Drusilla attended to garments and shawls. Their coordination allowed multiple figures to occupy the space simultaneously. Each visitor accommodated without pause or confusion. Evening introduced new complexities. A soldier returned from patrol, carrying letters and small parcels, his presence demanding adjustments to seating, tables, and service. A traveler arrived late, needing refreshment and a place to rest. Another merchant brought wine in clay jars, setting them carefully upon the table. Each situation prompted precise, silent choreography. Livia guided and adjusted. Fabia arranged and cleared. Marcia checked light and oil. Sulpicia served food and drink. Drusilla smoothed folds and restored order. The house remained alive with measured motion, each movement reinforcing the calm, deliberate rhythm. Throughout the night, subtle interactions continued. Visitors shifted positions, exchanged coins, offered small gifts, and adjusted garments. The women responded immediately yet with quiet patience, maintaining balance in the space. Livia poured wine and adjusted seating. Fabia aligned cushions and cleared crumbs. Marcia maintained steady illumination. Sulpicia replenished food and water. Drusilla attended to garments, shawls, and minor adjustments. Each action contributed to the ongoing flow, seamless and deliberate. At intervals, unexpected visitors arrived. A courier bearing messages, a traveler with bundles of herbs, a freedman delivering coins or small gifts. The women integrated these figures into the existing rhythm with ease. Livia guided them to seating or spaces for their wares. Fabia arranged objects neatly and cleared paths. Marcia ensured lamps and oil vessels provided light and stability. Sulpicia offered refreshments, and Drusilla attended to garments and small details, maintaining the continuity of care. As the night deepened, the pace slowed slightly, though the women's attentiveness never wavered. Cushions were straightened, tables cleared, lamps trimmed and checked. Drusilla folded shawls and arranged garments. Fabia swept crumbs and realigned surfaces. Marcia ensured lamps burned evenly. Sulpicia replenished food and water, while Livia oversaw the organization of the house, maintaining balance and order. Tyro moved quietly, checking doors and jars, sweeping floors, and ensuring security. The last visitors departed, leaving coins, cloaks, or faint traces of their presence. The house exhaled into quiet. The subtle scent of herbs, oil, and wine lingered in the air. Lamps glowed faintly before dimming, cushions lay in careful alignment, tables bore traces of the day's activity. Each object, gesture, and movement testified to the rhythm of life that had passed through the house. Deliberate, patient, continuous. Even in silence, the house maintained its pulse. Every action of the women, each small adjustment or replenishment, spoke of care and attention. The rhythm of their coordinated motion persisted, a quiet testament to the life within. Visitors' presence had left subtle traces, absorbed into the structure and order of the home. Life continued not in dramatic turns, but in careful, measured, and consistent movement, every action reinforcing the continuity of space and purpose. Another cycle of day and night concluded, yet the rhythm endured. The women, the freedmen, the visitors, and the city beyond all contributed to the ongoing flow, each action both independent and part of a larger, deliberate pattern. Within the walls, life unfolded steadily, measured in gestures, movements, and the quiet choreography that defined the house. Order persisted, subtle and unbroken, ready to accommodate the variations of the next day with the same patience and precision. Shadows deepened within the rooms as the house continued its measured rhythm. Cushions lay arranged in precise patterns upon benches and low couches. Tables bore plates of figs and bread, and vessels of oil glowed faintly in their steady positions. Livia moved among them, adjusting folds of fabric and smoothing cushions, her gestures careful, deliberate. Fabia swept the floors, brushing dust into corners while keeping the central spaces free for movement. Marcia trimmed lamp wicks and ensured that oil vessels remained filled and steady. Sulpicia carried small plates of fruit and bread, replenishing them as needed, while Drusilla adjusted garments and shawls, keeping each fold exact. Visitors arrived with subtle variation, each requiring attention in slightly different ways. A merchant with a package of fine silks entered, careful to avoid brushing against tables or vessels. Livia guided him to a bench. Fabia adjusted the display of silk. Marcia ensured illumination fell evenly across the room. Sulpicia offered a plate of figs, and Drusilla smoothed the folds of his cloak. Every movement was synchronized, each anticipating the next, maintaining order in the presence of the new figure. Shortly after, a soldier returned from a distant camp, his armor dulled by travel and the faint scent of dust and sweat clinging to him. Livia motioned toward seating. Fabia cleared the space. Marcia adjusted lamps to remove shadows. Sulpicia offered water, and Drusilla restored the folds of his tunic and cloak. The women moved seamlessly, integrating him into the ongoing rhythm without disrupting the flow of the house. Unexpected situations began to arise. A courier arrived abruptly, carrying letters that required immediate placement upon a central table. Livia guided the courier with calm gestures. Fabia cleared the surface. Marcia adjusted the lamp to illuminate the documents. Sulpicia placed a small plate of bread nearby, and Drusilla folded garments away from the table, ensuring ease of movement. The interaction was brief, yet coordinated perfectly, returning the room to its previous order almost without pause. A traveler appeared, burdened with a large bundle of herbs and a jar of wine. He struggled momentarily with the weight, and the women adapted instantly. Livia extended a hand. Fabia adjusted cushions to create space. Marcia moved a lamp to brighten the area. Sulpicia offered figs and bread, and Drusilla cleared the path for him to set his load safely. The house absorbed the unexpected presence, movements flowing naturally, maintaining harmony. Visitors continued to arrive in succession, each requiring subtle adjustments. A freedman bearing coins sought guidance to place his pouch without disturbing the existing layout. A merchant with a small parcel of dried fruits needed a place to rest it. Each scenario prompted coordinated responses from the women. Livia guided and adjusted. Fabia aligned tables and cleared pathways. Marcia ensured steady light. Sulpicia served refreshments, and Drusilla attended to garments and small details. The rhythm remained uninterrupted, even as the flow of visitors became increasingly complex. By mid-afternoon, the house accommodated a larger variety of figures simultaneously. A group of merchants entered together, each with wares requiring space and careful placement. Livia motioned toward seating arrangements. Fabia arranged cushions and aligned tables. Marcia maintained even illumination. Sulpicia replenished food and water, and Drusilla attended to garments and small objects in motion. Their coordination allowed multiple visitors to exist within the space without confusion, each movement purposeful and deliberate. Evening introduced new challenges. A soldier returned, carrying a set of messages and a small bundle, requiring careful handling. A traveler appeared late, needing refreshment and seating. Another merchant arrived with jars of wine and bread, demanding precise arrangement. Each scenario called for careful choreography among the women. Livia guided, Fabia adjusted, Marcia checked illumination and stability, Sulpicia served, and Drusilla restored garments and order. The house functioned as a single entity, responsive and alive, each woman's actions supporting the others. Subtle disruptions continued to occur. A cup of wine tipped slightly, a shawl fell from a chair, a bundle of herbs shifted unexpectedly. Each incident was met with immediate, coordinated action. Livia adjusted seating or placement. Fabia cleared or realigned objects. Marcia checked lamps and oil vessels. Sulpicia replenished food and drink, and Drusilla smoothed folds and restored order. The rhythm of the house remained intact, seamless, deliberate. Late into the night, visitors arrived with diverse needs. A merchant carrying silk sought a proper display. A soldier bearing a small parcel needed space to sit and rest. A traveler with a jar of wine required placement and service. Each situation was managed with quiet precision. Livia guided and adjusted. Fabia aligned surfaces and cushions. Marcia ensured light and balance. Sulpicia replenished food and drink. Drusilla smoothed garments and arranged shawls. The house remained alive with subtle, coordinated motion, accommodating every visitor with care and consistency. As the night deepened, movements gradually slowed. Cushions were straightened, tables cleared, lamps trimmed and checked. Drusilla folded garments and arranged shawls. Fabia swept crumbs and realigned surfaces. Marcia maintained illumination and stability. Sulpicia replenished bowls of fruit and water. Livia oversaw the organization of the house, ensuring every object, every space, every small gesture contributed to the continuity of rhythm. Tyro moved quietly, checking doors, jars, and floors. The final visitors departed, leaving faint traces of their presence. A coin on a table, a cloak draped across a chair, the subtle scent of wine, herbs, or bread. The house exhaled into quiet, the pulse slowing but unbroken. Every gesture, movement, and placement spoke of attention, care, and the persistent rhythm that defined the house. Life continued in measured, deliberate motion, each action reinforcing the order and harmony within. Even in silence, the house maintained its presence. Lamps dimmed, shadows stretched across walls adorned with painted figures of gods and symbols. Cushions remained aligned, tables cleared, and the air carried the faint sense of oil, herbs, and fruit. Every movement of the women, each small adjustment, each replenished plate or cup, bore witness to the continuous rhythm that had sustained the house through day and night. Another cycle of activity passed, yet the rhythm endured. The women, the freedmen, the visitors, and the city beyond all contributed to the ongoing flow. Each gesture, each movement, each interaction reinforced the quiet, deliberate pulse of the house. Within its walls, life unfolded steadily, measured in patience, precision, and the subtle choreography that connected women, visitors, and the world beyond. Even in silence, the house maintained its pulse. Every action of the women, Each small adjustment or replenishment spoke of care and attention. The rhythm of their coordinated motion persisted, a quiet testament to the life within. Visitors' presence had left subtle traces, absorbed into the structure and order of the home. Life continued not in dramatic turns, but in careful, measured, and consistent movement, every action reinforcing the continuity of space and purpose. Another cycle of day and night concluded, yet the rhythm endured. The women, the freedmen, the visitors, and the city beyond all contributed to the ongoing flow, each action both independent and part of a larger, deliberate pattern. Within the walls, life unfolded steadily, measured in gestures, movements, and the quiet choreography that defined the house. Order persisted, subtle and unbroken, ready to accommodate the variations of the next day with the same patience and precision. The house stirred gently, as though sensing the arrival of a new sequence of activity. Visitors appeared in overlapping waves, some entering together, others in succession, each bearing unique needs and requests. Livia moved fluidly between rooms, guiding figures to seats and spaces, adjusting cushions and arranging garments. Fabia swept floors and cleared pathways, ensuring movement remained unhindered. Marcia maintained lamps and vessels of oil, trimming wicks and adjusting light. Sulpicia replenished plates of bread, figs, and water. Drusilla attended to the smallest details of clothing, shawls, and the alignment of objects, her movements light and precise. A merchant arrived first, carrying bolts of cloth interwoven with fine threads. He set them carefully upon a table while the women responded in concert. Livia guided him to a seat. Fabia aligned the fabric. Marcia positioned a lamp to illuminate the folds. Sulpicia offered small refreshments, and Drusilla smoothed the folds of his cloak. Their coordinated gestures absorbed the visitor into the flow of the house, maintaining calm despite the complexity of his wares. Simultaneously, a soldier entered carrying a bundle of letters, his armor faintly dusty from travel. Livia shifted attention, motioning toward a low couch, while Fabia adjusted the nearest tables and removed small obstacles from his path. Marcia moved a lamp to illuminate the letters, Sulpicia offered water, and Drusilla straightened garments and arranged shawls to allow space for his seating. Even with multiple figures, the women responded seamlessly, integrating each visitor without pause. A traveler arrived just as the previous visitors settled, burdened with jars of wine and small packets of dried fruit. Livia guided him toward a table cleared by Fabia. Marcia adjusted a lamp to provide steady light. Sulpicia offered a plate of figs and bread, and Drusilla smoothed the folds of the traveler's cloak and shawl. Each action overlapped subtly with the others, a choreography invisible to those outside the house, yet perfectly orchestrated. The complexity increased further as a freedman carrying coins and small parcels entered the room. Livia directed him toward a space beside the merchant. Fabia rearranged cushions and tables. Marcia moved lamps to balance illumination. Sulpicia replenished refreshments, and Drusilla ensured that garments and objects did not obstruct movement. Each figure's arrival required adaptation, yet the rhythm of the house persisted, measured and deliberate. Visitors began to interact with each other within the space, their gestures prompting subtle adjustments by the women. Coins were exchanged, parcels placed, garments shifted, cups refilled. Livia responded with calm guidance. Fabia aligned and cleared surfaces. Marcia maintained even light. Sulpicia offered food and drink, and Drusilla smoothed folds and arranged shawls. The house absorbed every change, each woman's movement anticipating and complementing the next. Outside, a small group of travelers arrived, moving along the narrow street toward the entrance. The women anticipated their needs, adjusting interior spaces to accommodate additional figures. Livia guided the newcomers to seating, Fabia cleared pathways, Marcia adjusted lamps for visibility, Sulpicia offered small plates of fruit, and Drusilla managed garments and small objects to maintain order. Even with movement spilling between rooms and into the front, the rhythm remained continuous, deliberate, and unbroken. Within a short span, multiple visitors required attention across different rooms. Livia moved between spaces, providing guidance and direction. Fabia swept floors, aligned tables, and cleared pathways. Marcia ensured all lamps burned evenly. Sulpicia replenished food and water. Drusilla attended to clothing, shawls, and small details. Each woman's actions interwove with the others, creating a silent symphony of movement, care, and attention. Unexpected situations arose. A jar of wine tipped slightly, spilling upon a cloth. A bundle of herbs slipped from a traveler's grasp. A shawl fell from a chair. Livia responded immediately. Fabia adjusted surfaces and cleared obstructions. Marcia checked lamps, Sulpicia replenished refreshments, and Drusilla restored garments and objects. Even in moments of minor disruption, the rhythm persisted, measured and precise. As the afternoon deepened, more visitors arrived, each bringing subtle variations. A merchant with fine spices required careful placement. A soldier carrying a small chest needed seating and lighting. A traveler with parcels of dried fruits sought a clear space to rest his belongings. Livia guided each into proper positions. Fabia ensured surfaces and floors were aligned and clear. Marcia balanced illumination. Sulpicia replenished plates and cups, and Drusilla attended to garments and folds. The house functioned as a living system, each figure accommodated without disturbance to the ongoing flow. In the evening, shadows stretched across walls and floors, and the house adapted to the increasing complexity of visitors. A merchant returned with new wares, adding to the previous arrangements. A soldier arrived with a bundle of letters and a small parcel. A traveler sought seating with a jar of wine and small packets of dried fruit. Livia moved between rooms, guiding and adjusting. Fabia aligned tables and cushions, cleared pathways, and maintained smooth flow. Marcia positioned lamps and maintained stability. Sulpicia replenished food and drink. Drusilla smoothed garments and shawls, ensuring all objects rested precisely. Even as the number of visitors increased, small interactions continued to ripple through the house. Coins were placed on tables, parcels set carefully, garments adjusted, cups filled and passed. Livia moved fluidly, Fabia aligned and cleared, Marcia balanced light, Sulpicia offered sustenance, and Drusilla ensured order. Each movement was deliberate, each adjustment reinforcing the stability and continuity of the home. Late into the night, unexpected arrivals continued. A courier with letters, a traveler with a bundle of herbs, a freedman bearing coins or small gifts. Each scenario was integrated into the ongoing rhythm. Livia guided and adjusted. Fabia cleared surfaces and pathways. Marcia ensured illumination. Sulpicia replenished refreshments, and Drusilla smoothed garments and restored order. The house responded without hesitation, the women's movements interwoven into a seamless choreography of care and attention. As the last visitors departed, the house exhaled into quiet. Cushions lay aligned, tables cleared, lamps burned evenly before dimming, and the scent of oil, herbs, and bread lingered in the air. Every gesture, every adjustment, every replenished plate or cup spoke of attention, care, and persistent rhythm. Life continued in deliberate motion, each action reinforcing the harmony and order within the house. Even in silence, the pulse persisted. The women's coordinated movements, the subtle traces of visitors, the alignment of objects and garments, and the balance of light and shadow testified to the enduring flow of life within the home. The rhythm, complex yet measured, persisted through night into the quiet anticipation of the next day, prepared to accommodate new situations, new figures, and the ongoing choreography that bound house, women, and city together. The rooms filled with the quiet pulse of anticipation as new visitors approached, each bringing subtle variations that required attention. Livia moved fluidly between spaces, her hands adjusting cushions, guiding figures to seats, and arranging garments with deliberate care. Fabia swept floors and aligned tables, ensuring the pathways remained unobstructed. Marcia maintained lamps and oil vessels, trimming wicks and adjusting the glow. Sulpicia replenished plates of figs, bread, and water, while Drusilla attended to shawls, garments, and small objects, her movements precise and unhurried. Among the visitors, a scholar arrived carrying a bundle of scrolls and a small astrolabe. The instrument, delicate and unfamiliar, demanded careful placement. Livia guided the scholar to a low bench. Fabia cleared space upon the table. Marcia adjusted a lamp to illuminate both the scrolls and the instrument. Sulpicia offered a plate of figs, and Drusilla smoothed the scholar's cloak and arranged a shawl to protect the delicate tools. The rhythm of the house absorbed this new element, integrating it seamlessly with ongoing motions. At the same moment, a wandering musician appeared, carrying a small lyre and a set of wooden flutes. The arrival introduced a faint musical hum into the space, soft notes threading through the air. Livia guided him to a corner, where the instruments could rest safely. Fabia cleared surrounding surfaces. Marcia ensured even illumination. Sulpicia offered bread and water, and Drusilla folded shawls and arranged cushions so that sound traveled freely without obstruction. The subtle melodies mingled with the usual rhythms of movement, creating a layered harmony of sound and gesture. Visitors continued to arrive in overlapping patterns, requiring intricate adjustments. A merchant carrying fragrant herbs needed careful space for display. A soldier bearing letters required both seating and attentive handling. A traveler with jars of oil sought a clear path for placement. Livia directed each to suitable positions. Fabia aligned surfaces and pathways. Marcia balanced light and shadows. Sulpicia replenished refreshments, and Drusilla ensured garments and shawls did not impede movement. Each addition was absorbed into the house's ongoing rhythm without disruption. Small incidents arose naturally. A jar of wine tipped slightly, spilling upon a table. A bundle of herbs shifted unexpectedly. A cushion slipped from its place. Livia responded with quiet authority, guiding the adjustment. Fabia cleared and realigned surfaces. Marcia ensured lamps remained steady. Sulpicia replaced spilled food and drink. Drusilla smoothed folds of garments and shawls, restoring order. Each minor disruption became an opportunity for coordinated movement, reinforcing the seamless flow of the household. Evening brought further complexity. A group of merchants arrived together, each carrying unique wares: jars of honey, bundles of dried fruit, small pots of oils. Livia guided them to seating. Fabia arranged cushions and aligned tables. Marcia adjusted lamps to illuminate the varied objects. Sulpicia offered small plates and water, and Drusilla attended to garments and shawls, ensuring unobstructed paths. Multiple visitors interacted subtly, exchanging coins, gestures, and brief nods, and the women moved among them, maintaining a steady, deliberate rhythm. Outside, a small traveler lingered at the entrance, unable to carry his parcels inside. Livia extended guidance. Fabia cleared a path. Marcia moved lamps to illuminate the doorway. Sulpicia offered bread and figs, and Drusilla adjusted folds of a shawl to allow the visitor to step inside with ease. The interaction added a new layer, connecting the interior of the house with the streets beyond. a gentle expansion of the house's rhythm into the world outside. A scholar needed assistance once more, this time arranging a set of scrolls across a table while consulting the small astrolabe. Livia guided the hands of the scholar, Fabia aligned the surfaces, Marcia adjusted illumination for clarity, Sulpicia offered refreshments, and Drusilla smoothed garments and folded shawls, ensuring no obstruction to the scholar's work. Nearby, the musician played softly, his notes weaving through the air as if accompanying the precise movements of the women. Even as night deepened, visitors arrived with subtle demands. A soldier carrying letters needed space for both writing and seating. A traveler with bundles of herbs sought a clean surface and unobstructed passage. A merchant arrived with jars of wine and small items of luxury. Each scenario prompted coordinated movement. Livia guided, Fabia adjusted surfaces and pathways, Marcia ensured light and balance, Sulpicia replenished food and drink, and Drusilla attended to garments and small details. Every action contributed to the seamless, layered rhythm of the household. Interactions among visitors themselves occasionally required delicate attention. Coins were exchanged, small objects passed, brief gestures communicated. Livia anticipated the flow of motion. Fabia cleared surfaces and maintained alignment. Marcia adjusted light. Sulpicia offered sustenance. And Drusilla smoothed folds and shawls to prevent interference. Even the smallest interaction became part of the choreography, handled with calm and precision. Late into the night, unexpected arrivals continued. A courier with messages, a traveler with delicate herbs, a merchant with unique spices. Each scenario required integration into the ongoing rhythm. Livia guided seating and placement. Fabia adjusted surfaces and floors. Marcia balanced illumination. Sulpicia offered refreshments. And Drusilla attended to garments and folds. Despite increasing complexity, the house absorbed every visitor, every minor disruption, maintaining measured, deliberate motion. By the final hours, the house exhaled quietly, but its pulse remained. Cushions were aligned, tables cleared, lamps burned evenly before dimming, and the air retained subtle scents of oil, herbs, and baked bread. The women moved with gentle precision, restoring garments, replenishing food and water, and adjusting every detail with attentive care. Each gesture, each adjustment, each plate or cup reinforced the continuity of order, attention, and rhythm. Even in silence, the house carried the memory of the day, layered interactions, overlapping movements, subtle melodies from instruments, and the precise choreography of multiple visitors and situations. The rhythm of life persisted, measured, deliberate, and unbroken, prepared to accommodate the next day's variations, new visitors, and unforeseen circumstances. Within its walls, women, guests, and the world beyond moved together in harmonious, continuous flow, a testament to patience, coordination, and calm. The house awoke gently with the soft light of early evening, the rooms already alive with traces of previous activity. Cushions lay carefully aligned on benches and low couches. Tables bore plates of figs, bread, and small vessels of wine, and lamps glowed softly with steady oil. Livia moved between rooms, her hands adjusting cushions and guiding visitors to seats with deliberate care. Fabia swept floors and cleared pathways, ensuring that movement remained unobstructed. Marcia tended lamps, trimming wicks and repositioning vessels to maintain uniform illumination. Sulpicia replenished refreshments, while Drusilla smoothed shawls, folded garments, and arranged small objects with precision. The complexity of the evening increased as multiple groups arrived nearly simultaneously. A merchant with a collection of rare spices entered one room, arranging jars upon a low table. Livia guided him to a bench, Fabia aligned surfaces and cleared space. Marcia adjusted lamps to illuminate each jar. Sulpicia offered figs and water, and Drusilla arranged shawls and garments so the display remained unobstructed. At the same time, A soldier entered another room, carrying letters and a small parcel, his presence requiring careful attention. Livia guided him to seating. Fabia cleared surrounding space. Marcia ensured proper lighting. Sulpicia offered bread and water, and Drusilla adjusted garments and cushions to allow ease of movement. Meanwhile, a traveling musician arrived with a lyre and small flutes, softly playing notes that floated through the house. Livia directed him to a corner where sound could flow freely. Fabia cleared tables and cushions. Marcia balanced illumination. Sulpicia replenished refreshments, and Drusilla arranged garments and shawls to prevent obstruction. The gentle music mingled with the movements of the women, layering sound upon the ongoing rhythm of coordinated activity. Unexpected incidents punctuated the evening. A jar of wine tipped slightly as a merchant adjusted its placement. A shawl fell from a chair in another room. A cushion slipped under the feet of a traveler. Livia responded immediately, guiding adjustments and directing attention. Fabia aligned tables and surfaces, swept crumbs, and maintained clear pathways. Marcia repositioned lamps, trimmed wicks, and balanced light across rooms. Sulpicia replenished plates and cups, while Drusilla smoothed folds of garments and arranged shawls to restore order. Each minor disruption became an opportunity to reinforce the steady, deliberate rhythm of the household. As more visitors arrived, the simultaneous management of multiple spaces required precise coordination. A group of merchants entered with bundles of cloth and small parcels. Livia guided each to appropriate seating. Fabia arranged cushions and cleared surfaces. Marcia ensured even illumination. Sulpicia offered food and drink, and Drusilla attended to garments and shawls. Another group, consisting of a traveler with jars of oil, a soldier carrying messages, and a scholar with scrolls and a small astrolabe, occupied adjoining rooms. Livia moved between spaces, guiding and adjusting. Fabia cleared and aligned. Marcia balanced illumination. Sulpicia replenished sustenance, and Drusilla managed garments and small objects. The house functioned as a single entity, responsive and harmonious despite the layered activity. The interactions among visitors themselves introduced subtle challenges. Coins were exchanged, parcels shifted, brief gestures and nods prompted minor adjustments in placement. Livia anticipated these movements. Fabia cleared surfaces and realigned tables. Marcia ensured lamps cast light evenly. Sulpicia offered refreshments, and Drusilla adjusted folds and shawls. Each delicate exchange became part of the choreography, absorbed seamlessly into the ongoing rhythm. Later in the evening, unique scenarios arose. A courier appeared at the threshold, carrying scrolls that required careful placement. Livia guided him inside. Fabia cleared a path. Marcia moved lamps to illuminate the documents. Sulpicia offered a small plate of figs, and Drusilla adjusted garments to allow free movement. Simultaneously, a traveler arrived with a bundle of fragrant herbs and small jars of oils. Livia guided him towards seating. Fabia arranged surfaces. Marcia balanced illumination. Sulpicia replenished bread and water, and Drusilla smoothed folds and shawls to prevent obstruction. The house absorbed both arrivals, movements overlapping without disruption. Music continued to drift through the rooms, adding a layer of gentle rhythm to the already complex interplay of gestures. The musician moved lightly among visitors, adjusting instruments and seating, while the women accommodated each subtle note, ensuring both sound and movement coexisted in harmony. Livia guided, Fabia aligned and cleared, Marcia balanced light, Sulpicia replenished food and drink, and Drusilla arranged garments and shawls. As night deepened, the arrival of additional visitors created further layers. A soldier bearing messages needed precise placement of documents. A merchant with small jars of honey sought space to display wares. A scholar with scrolls required lighting and clear surfaces. Livia directed seating and placement. Fabia aligned surfaces and cleared floors. Marcia adjusted illumination and lamps. Sulpicia offered refreshments, and Drusilla attended to garments and folds. Each figure was integrated into the ongoing rhythm, movement deliberate and measured, order maintained. At intervals, small disruptions occurred. A jar tipped, a cushion shifted, a shawl fell. Each incident prompted coordinated responses. Livia guided adjustments. Fabia realigned tables and surfaces. Marcia ensured lamps burned steadily. Sulpicia replenished plates and cups. And Drusilla restored folds and garments. Even amid minor disturbances, the house's rhythm persisted, seamless and deliberate. Late into the night, multiple groups remained, each occupying different rooms, each requiring careful attention. Visitors interacted subtly. Coins exchanged, parcels passed, gestures communicated. Livia anticipated movement. Fabia cleared surfaces and realigned tables. Marcia balanced illumination. Sulpicia offered sustenance. And Drusilla managed garments and shawls. The house functioned as a single living system, the women coordinating across rooms, maintaining harmony and order despite increasing complexity. When the last visitors departed, the house exhaled into quiet. Cushions lay aligned, tables cleared, lamps dimmed, and the faint scent of oil, herbs, and bread lingered. Every gesture, movement, and replenished plate or cup bore witness to the careful orchestration of the evening. The rhythm, layered and complex, persisted through silence, a testament to the skill and coordination of the women. Even in the stillness of the night, the house carried the memory of the evening. Multiple visitors, overlapping movements, subtle melodies, and the precise choreography of care and attention. Life within the walls continued in deliberate motion, prepared to absorb the next day's arrivals, the next wave of interactions, and the inevitable minor disruptions, all handled with patience, harmony, and measured grace. The house maintained its gentle pulse as the evening continued, shadows stretching across benches, tables, and cushions, soft light from oil lamps mingling with the fading glow from the windows. Livia moved through the rooms with practiced ease, guiding the few remaining visitors to comfortable seats, adjusting cushions and folding garments with subtle gestures. Fabia swept the floors, aligning tables and clearing small objects that had shifted during the night. Marcia checked the lamps, trimming wicks and ensuring a steady, soft illumination that cast long, quiet shadows. Sulpicia replenished small plates of bread and figs, moving slowly now, and Drusilla attended to shawls and garments, smoothing folds and straightening each detail with deliberate care. The room seemed to sigh with familiarity, each object, each cushion, each lamp in its proper place. Visitors moved quietly, their presence subdued as the day's activity waned. A merchant with delicate jars of honey lingered near a table, arranging his wares, while a scholar unrolled a final scroll across a low surface, the soft scratch of parchment adding a faint rhythm to the air. Livia guided them gently. Fabia cleared nearby surfaces. Marcia adjusted lamps to balance the illumination. Sulpicia offered water, and Drusilla smoothed garments and shawls. Even as activity slowed, the coordination of the women remained precise and deliberate, an unbroken thread connecting past motion with present stillness. Soft music drifted from a corner where the musician had lingered, his lyre's final notes fading into the evening. The rhythm of the house shifted subtly, slowing without disruption, each movement measured and unhurried. Visitors exchanged quiet gestures, coins placed carefully upon tables, parcels adjusted for ease. Livia moved between rooms, Fabia aligned cushions, Marcia maintained even light, Sulpicia replenished small plates, and Drusilla arranged garments, each action reinforcing the calm, continuous flow. The night deepened further, and with it, the complexity of earlier activity diminished. Visitors left one by one, departing quietly, leaving faint traces of their presence. A small coin on a table, a shawl draped upon a chair, the lingering scent of herbs or oil. Livia adjusted the remaining cushions, smoothing folds of fabric, guiding the final few figures to seating with gentle gestures. Fabia swept crumbs from the floors and realigned tables. Marcia moved lamps, ensuring steady light in the diminishing rooms. Sulpicia replenished the last plates of figs and bread, and Drusilla arranged garments and shawls, her motions deliberate and serene. The house itself seemed to inhale slowly, the pulse of the day gradually fading. Lamps glowed softly, casting long, gentle shadows across walls adorned with painted figures and symbols. Tables and benches rested in their precise arrangements, cushions aligned, small objects placed with care. The women moved quietly, each gesture slower now, deliberate but softened by the evening's calm. The rhythm persisted, though more gentle, echoing the passage of time rather than urging motion. Even as the last visitors departed, the women continued their movements, folding garments, adjusting cushions, and ensuring every table and vessel rested in perfect order. The air was fragrant with the subtle sense of oil, herbs, bread, and fruit. Every small movement seemed amplified in the quiet, deliberate gestures taking on a ritual-like quality, each one contributing to the enduring sense of calm and stability. Outside, the city's noise dimmed, replaced by the soft rustle of distant wind and the faint murmurs of night travelers. Within the house, the women moved as one, silent, coordinated, attentive. Livia oversaw the final arrangements. Fabia straightened tables and floors. Marcia adjusted lamps to their lowest glow. Sulpicia set the last refreshments in neat piles, and Drusilla smoothed the folds of each garment and shawl one final time. The house, fully prepared, exhaled a gentle, measured pause. A faint, lingering warmth remained where visitors had rested, a delicate residue of the day's activity. The placement of small jars, the alignment of cushions, the gentle trails of fabric. Livia walked slowly through the rooms, pausing at each table and seat, ensuring that the flow of movement and care persisted even in stillness. Fabia followed, her sweeping gestures now quiet and unobtrusive. Marcia adjusted a lamp to throw a soft pool of light across a central table. Sulpicia moved plates and vessels slightly to maintain balance, and Drusilla arranged the last shawls, each fold precise and deliberate. The rhythm of the house had shifted from motion to presence, subtle and enduring. The rooms, once filled with overlapping activity, now held only soft traces. A coin here, a shawl there, a faint scent of oil and bread. Livia paused in a central room, surveying the spaces with careful eyes, the echo of past activity present in every detail. Fabia rested her broom gently against a wall. Marcia allowed the lamps to burn softly without adjustment. Sulpicia sat briefly on a cushion, and Drusilla smoothed the final folds of garments. Time slowed further, the night deepening into a gentle, encompassing quiet. The women, the rooms, and the objects within seemed to exhale together, the house itself a vessel of the day's measured rhythm. The pulse remained, faint but steady, a testament to the enduring coordination, attention, and care of those who moved within it. Each small gesture, each careful motion had contributed to the continuity of life, now gradually settling into calm. Even in the stillness, the house retained the memory of its activity. The layering of visitors, the subtle music, the placement of delicate jars and scrolls, the careful folding of garments and shawls, the alignment of cushions and tables. The women moved with quiet reverence, preserving order, maintaining balance, and allowing the space to breathe, filled with traces of life that had passed through its rooms. As the night deepened fully, the lamps dimmed to their lowest glow. Shadows stretched across walls and floors, blending with the soft outlines of benches and cushions. Livia moved slowly, ensuring the final details were in place. Fabia rested her broom. Marcia adjusted a final lamp. Sulpicia arranged plates neatly, and Drusilla smoothed the last folds of shawls and garments. The house exhaled a final, gentle sigh, the pulse of activity now entirely quiet, yet ever present in the careful, deliberate order of each object and movement.